Well, hello there. Good evening. Let's see. Do I have anyone online yet? Uh, okay. All right. It looks like I have at least one viewer, so I'll go ahead and get started here. Good evening. I'm Jay Darnell, and tonight what I'm doing is welcoming you all to my YouTube channel. Just started this channel, and I will use this to uh, have a place to store my podcasts, have a place to interact with the public on a few topics that I am very, very passionate about. And hopefully, we'll be able to help each other out and have some really good conversations. So, let me start out by making sure that I have my volume up here. Okay, there we go. And let me just give you a little bit of a background about what's going on. So, again, welcome to my YouTube channel. Uh, and this is the Cut Podcast, and it's named the Cut Podcast because I will be doing a podcast. And I believe that there's a need for fresh perspective around um, political and social issues that impact uh, not only the Black community, but especially the Black community, and also the urban poor working class or the rural working poor, because we all have quite a bit in common that tends to be kind of covered up by the media purposely to keep us divided. Um, and there's a reason for that divide, and we're seeing it happen right now. With the way the wealthy is just kind of having their way, and there seems to be nothing that we can do about it, even though we have elected officials in place that we should be holding accountable for our needs as our elected officials. So, uh, before we dive in, I'll just tell you what my podcast will be about, and we can go from there. So first, as I mentioned, in this media landscape that we have, division is often prioritized over any form of unity. So the best way for us to really know how to move forward and actually have some type of progress is if we really understood what's going on. And I think our media sometimes intentionally tries to keep that from happening. Um, so what we're going to do here is we're going to be having, real, uh, raw and unfiltered conversations. We're creating a space for that, for them to be honest, for you to be honest. We're going to talk about the true challenges facing our country. The central thesis of the podcast is simple, but it's powerful, I think, and that's that the realest issues in this country are more along the lines of socio economic injustice and not really the social issues that are harped upon by our media because they tend to drive a lot of emotional division and a lot of emotional discord. So I think that one way we have to be able to um, one way that we can help each other move along is to get back to actually talking about issues that matter and not about the things that we may be passionate about. However, they won't help us in the long run with our lives moving forward. They have nothing to do with us. They may have something to do with someone else. Um, so let's talk about some of the common economic interests that we all have. And the reason I say the Black community and the rural poor working class is, I firmly believe that was one of the missions Dr. King had, and also some other groups in the past and that is to try and find the largest group of people in this country who are marginalized, and to be able to help those people, and help us get beyond the things that we currently vote for, which a lot of times have to do with race or social issues, like who someone loves, or how what's someone's gender. So, and yeah, I see that we definitely agree with that, Crystal, and I see your note there. So, and I will be talking about the Citizens United decision quite a bit in my conversations going forward. So, one of the things about this podcast is every week I'll be coming forward and we'll have some analysis, some interviews. Tonight I don't have a guest, but in the future we will have guests here. I know quite a few people in the political spectrum and also in the uh, public space, folks who may be familiar to you, on the news and other places. So I've already spoken to many of them, and they will be joining me over the weeks and months to come. So if you haven't told all your friends to subscribe, please do that. It's going to be rough once you start to give information that people can actually use. You become you become a target, so to speak. So I know that this can be challenging. I know that this can be something that could potentially be dangerous, but we have to have someone grab the mic and say the things that have to be said, and especially when those people have the experience that they have. So, and talking of experience, let me just kind of give you a little bit of mine. One of the reasons I became so politically inclined is after serving 24 years in our military, I ran for city council and then for U.S. Congress. And one of the things I learned while running is that um, there are a lot of challenges we have in our own house, meaning our party, that neglect the good candidates for the sake of bringing in people whose families are wealthy or people who have wealthy connections. So I'll just put it out there. That's just kind of how it is. And for anyone who knows my campaign for Congress, you know that, and also my campaign for City Council, you know that as well. So tonight, what I really wanted to focus on, though, is talking about this two-party system. And you know so first we'll examine our political system itself, and we'll talk about whether or not a two-party system structure actually serves the needs of the American people, and particularly Black Americans. Uh, what are the benefits and limitations of this system for creating meaningful progress and stability? We'll look at the economic similarities that unite American voters across regional and demographic lines. Uh, we'll look we'll look at we'll talk about, despite the polarization we see in the media, how many Americans share common economic concerns, concerns that often get buried under the manufactured culture wars that I mentioned earlier. We'll explore the concept of constitutionally protected classes, and how these protections have evolved or failed to evolve over time. A significant portion of our discussion will focus on the unique challenges and incredible resilience of the Black community in America. We'll highlight both our struggles and our tremendous cultural and economic influence that really has where we have more power than anyone can imagine. Um, we'll tackle the realities of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, where they're making genuine progress and where they're falling short. Uh, and finally, I'll shine a light on corporate greed and how it impacts communities across America, particularly marginalized ones. Uh, Now, I want to be transparent about where I'm coming from. And this podcast approaches these issues from a progressive perspective, but I do believe in economic justice, strong social safety nets, systemic reform. But that doesn't mean that I'm pushing a single viewpoint or agenda. So some people in regular conversation get a little upset with me because they say I sound like I'm really hard on Democrats. And I am really hard on Democrats. The reason why I'm very hard on Democrats is because that's who's gotten my vote 100% of the time. So I deserve to hold them accountable, and they are responsible to me. We must remember that public servants actually work for the public. It's not the other way around. Um, and what makes the Cut podcast different is our commitment to facts and nuance. So I may talk about some opinion papers and those kinds of things. However, I will always try my best to get back to the fact-based, the evidence-based facts that are out there. I'll even ask for your help if you find articles that may be helpful to help us get through one of our topics that we're talking about. Please feel free to share those articles with me. I have some tonight that I'll share with you. And then um, too often conversations about race, politics, and economics in America become oversimplified and emotionally charged, as I mentioned earlier, without addressing the underlying systems that perpetuate that inequality. And I think that, and this is my own personal position on this, is I think that the two-party system is by and far one of the primary systems that is doing that to perpetuate that inequality. We're going to look at the data. We're going to consider historical context. And most importantly, we're going to center on lived experiences of Black Americans while making connections to the broader struggle for economic justice that affects people across racial lines. You know, I was just laughing with someone the other day, and I told him, I said, I think the Harriet Tubman quote, and I don't know, I won't quote it, I'll paraphrase it, where um, you'd be able to help them if they knew they were a slave. And I think that doesn't just apply to Black people. It applies to people who are poor specifically, whose idea of the American dream is to be rich or to be wealthy. And we see that all the time. So let's delve into the first topic. And so I'm looking at Chrissy's comment. Yes, I agree. If poor people aligned and voted according to their common issues, there'd be a major shift in the political landscape. The first order of business needs to be reversing the Citizens United decision. I totally agree with that, and I'll even go further and ask a question on that to see what you believe and what others believe is. So, in the 2016 and 2020 Democratic primaries, uh, Senator Bernie Sanders put out a lot of platform items, platform issues that I can say directly would have impacted me and my family, every member of my family, in terms of wealth building or the ability to build wealth. Um, but I heard from a number of Democrats, of people who are Black and who are Democrats, telling me that um, that I needed to basically fall in line with the Democratic Party in their efforts to be more moderate. So how do we fix that? My question is, how do we fix that, and how do we convince other people who look like me that the middle is not where we need to be? And and how do we educate them on what the left is versus the right, and how the left became part of the right, essentially, because the moderates who are on the left are now very much in the middle, and some of them are even across the middle, in my opinion. Um, so I want to talk about something that's been largely missing from mainstream conversations about the 2024 election, and that is the intersection of Black voter dynamics, questions about election integrity, and what appears to be an institutional abandonment by Democratic Party leadership. Um, the official narrative surrounding Donald Trump's victory over Vice President Harris has focused heavily on shifting demographics and voter preferences, particularly this supposed decline in Black voter turnout or shifts among specific segments of Black voters. But there's something deeply problematic about this for me, about this framing, and we need to address it. Let's look at what we know. In several crucial swing states, independent analysts have identified concerning discrepancies between reported vote totals and voter registration databases. For example, in Pennsylvania, reports indicate that thousands of voter details didn't match official records, with similar patterns emerging in Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These aren't isolated incidents, and they represent or systematic irregularities that warrant serious investigation. But yet, instead of addressing these data inconsistencies, much of the mainstream conversation has pivoted to a narrative about Black voters. Specifically, the claim that significant number of Black voters, particularly men, shifted toward Trump or stayed at home entirely, which is just not true. I have not spoken to one Black man who is a voting Black man who stayed at home during this election. So it bothers me when I hear people say it, whether it's one of the pundits on television, or whether it's an elected official, or whether it's The View or whomever, say, this is what you voted for, because I don't believe that. And it's very hard for me to move forward knowing that these investigations have yet to be done. Okay. So I don't know if anybody else shares that sentiment or not, but I think a lot of people just kind of want to move on from it so that they don't focus on it because they don't want to stress about it. But my theory is, if the Democrats don't address it now, and every day they're sending out fundraising emails and text messages now wanting more money, but if they don't address it now, who's to say that it won't happen in the upcoming election? Who's to say that the way the system has been manipulated, or if their voting machines have been manipulated, that that's not something that can continue in the future? So in other words, the Democrats could win 70% of the vote, but we may not know that if we don't investigate to see what happened in the last election. And I think that is troubling. That's definitely troubling for me, because the Democrats seem to turn the other cheek, which my own investigative mind believes that some of them may be complicit in the whole thing. Um, yeah, especially with the way they responded when Vice President Harris was endorsed by President Biden to be the top of the ticket. So, what's particularly troubling and what we need to talk about is the deafening silence from the party leadership regarding these irregularities. Despite having the resources and responsibility to investigate political electoral discrepancies, party leadership has notably decided not to pursue any significant investigations in these outcomes. This raises a profoundly uncomfortable question. To what extent might this decision reflect race or gender bias against Vice President Harris within the Democratic Party itself? Is the rapid acceptance of defeat without thorough investigation indicative of a party establishment that was never fully invested in a Black woman candidate's success? I'm I hope that you guys will respond to some of these and send me some reactions if you agree with them, so I'll know I'm on the right track. And the last thing is, we should consider how different the response might have been with a different candidate at the top of the ticket. Historical precedent suggests that challenges to election integrity have been pursued with far more vigor in other circumstances. The willingness to quickly pivot to blaming Black voter turnout rather than examining systemic irregularities speaks volumes about whose political participation is valued and protected. This narrative serves multiple purposes. It discourages deeper questioning of election results by suggesting that the outcome simply reflects changing preferences among Black voters, and it absolves party leadership of responsibility by placing the burden on Black communities themselves. Uh, it's a convenient explanation that diverts attention from examining potential manipulation of voter data and potential complicity or indifference from party leadership. That's hard to think about, but for someone who sees right through it, it's It's the catalyst of the stress that I have every day. So let's be clear. Uh, I'm not making definitive claims about the election's outcome, but what I am saying is that we deserve transparent, fact based analysis of these discrepancies before accepting narratives that place the responsibility on Black voter behavior. And we deserve leadership that fights with equal vigor for all of its candidates, regardless of race or gender. There are also references I'll post on on this thread at the end of the conversation. Actually, I'll go ahead and start posting those now for you, to 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 jot down and be able to look at them later. And then so so this gets to heart of the socioeconomic justice issues that drives the podcast. And for political participation is inseparable from economic power. So you basically have to participate in politics in order to have any kind of economic power, especially in groups of people. Um, yeah, that's true. I agree with you. Chrissy's comment: the two things can be true. So both of those things can be true. The Dems were not genuinely invested in supporting a Black woman, and they lost Black voters. And and that I believe that to be true, especially post election. I believe that to be true, especially. So you know, you can't win an election. You can't win an election talking about how bad the other candidate is, and that's, to me, that's all we did. That's all the Democratic Party did was they really relied on people not voting for Trump because of how bad they were saying Trump is, but they weren't saying anything that they were themselves were going to do. And the promises that they made this time, they've made before, and those promises had not been fulfilled. So why would voters believe them when all they were doing was basing their entire campaign on how bad Trump was? So when communities lack resources and face structural barriers to voting, and when their concerns are easily dismissed by both parties, their economic interests are the first to be sacrificed. So I've heard my good friend Robert Williams say so many times and so long, why is there not a Black agenda in the Democratic Party if the Democratic Party relies so heavily on the Black vote? Um, Especially if they're going to blame the Black vote on them losing. um, I think one of the key ways I think to get around that is to take away the allegiance of Black people from the Democratic Party. You can still vote for Democrats, and I'm sure we will, but in terms of being registered as a Democrat, I have a problem with that because the Democratic Party doesn't have a reason to offer you anything if you've already sworn your allegiance by being registered. Because when you go to the polls, you're only going to be given a ballot with Democrats on it in some states. So to me, I think that's kind of offering up our allegiance without being offered anything. Um, all right. Uh, so the conversation we should be having isn't about whether Black voters fail to show up. It's about whether our electoral system and both political parties are structured to truly represent the economic interest of Black communities and working people across racial lines. I know that we're about 4 minutes from the end of this episode. So what I will tell you is in the coming weeks we'll be diving deeper into these themes. Next week we'll be examining the housing affordability crisis and its disproportionate impact on Black home ownership and wealth building. And I've got a surprise guest that I'll have with me next Tuesday evening. The week after that, I'll be looking at the state of labor organizing in Black communities and how union strength correlates with economic stability. I'm particularly excited about our upcoming conversation uh, with one of my very good friends who lives in Houston, about how two-party politics often fails to deliver meaningful economic change for marginalized communities. Remember, this podcast isn't just about my voice, it's about creating a community. I want to hear from you, which brings me to our call in segment. And I think what we'll do is we'll use the chat. So if you have any questions right now, please enter your question in the chat, and I will respond to it. Let's see. I'm trying to see who all do I have online here. Let's see. Let's see. So, okay, I'm still waiting on those questions. Oh yeah, here we go. Uh, yes, and I agree with that too, MJ. So, and Tony, I'm with you. Like I said, I know black men, plenty of black male Democrats, and everybody that I talked to voted. So it's if you can imagine how disheartening it is um, to be blamed for not voting, and even though it shows up at 92%, um, what was it, 92% for black women and 88% for black men. Um, who's to say that if there was voter um, integrity issues, that some of the votes that were taken away were not those of black males because they know the public would believe that black males didn't vote. So there are just so many questions out there that are not being answered, and I think we have a lot more work to do. So again, everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. And you know this is going to get better. We'll have as soon as I find an engineer to be able to work with me, we'll have the fancy photos and the fancy things pop up on the screen and all those. But for now, I just think it's so important that we have voices out there who are going to challenge the status quo, who are going to bring up the things that are important and that are unsaid. So if you have anything this week that you want to share with me, please just shoot me a message here or send me an email, send me an inbox message on Facebook, and I will be happy to I'll be happy to bring that back to you next week. Okay. So here I just posted another one of the links for you. And then there's the last one is the one that I posted on Facebook a few right after the election. I think it was November 13th, from someone I know is a very credible source. Um, so take down those articles, take a look at them, and tell me what you think next time we meet. All right. So have a good evening, everybody, and I appreciate you. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.